sustaining consumers. Without being rude to Georgine for one moment, there's not as many long words in this presentation, and it's not as technical, so you can relax a little bit more. What am I going to talk about today? Three major things: an overview of the grocery market, a look at the recession and its effects. Okay, I'm sure we're all feeling it in our own way, but in the big picture side of things. And then, how is the grocery market being sustained? How is the food market being sustained? What are the long-term trends coming on through there? Well, in the first instance, how do we measure these things? There's numerous ways, but just three simple ones are that, first of all, there are consumer surveys, omnibus research, where there's most of it being conducted online these days, and you can ring up literally in the morning with your questions, get them on a questionnaire in the afternoon. They're out on the internet to known participants. You get the results back the next day, which is a lot quicker and as accurate as the old days when it used to be telephones or people on street corners or anything like that. So that's all moved forward. There's diary data, whereby people are given a diary and asked to fill it in over a week, a fortnight, a month, whatever it is, and record their consumption. And then panel data, which we use a lot, a company called Kantar, used to be called TNS. They have a panel of 25,000 households. Every product they buy in supermarkets, etc., when they get home, they've got a barcode scanner and they just rescan it. All down the telephone line, into the main computer, and upweighted to represent the whole of the UK population. It's so accurate that when you hear that a major retailer has gone up 0.2 of a percentage point in their market share, that's the Kantar data. That's how useful it is and how well used it is. It can move share prices. That's how strong it is. But the UK grocery market itself is worth about £94 billion. 25.3 million households, probably increased earlier this week with the extra 500,000 people on the population that we all heard about. And you'll probably be surprised to hear that on average we all shop 257 times a year. But that means everything from popping in for a pint of milk or a loaf of bread right the way through to doing that incredibly massive Christmas shop. And the average trip spend is just over £14. And the average spend per buyer, £3,600. So on average, we all spend £3,600 cash after tax on food. So very important to all of us. In terms of how that market breaks down, then the biggest part is fresh and chilled. So you're talking there about meat, dairy, vegetables, fruit, everything like that. Ambient, which is the packaged good, tins of beans, etc., very large. Alcohol, large and forever increasing. Household goods, toiletries, frozen food. So a wide range of products, but dominated in the supermarkets by food. I'm sure nobody will be surprised to see that Tesco is the largest of the retailers, dominating the scene there with nearly twice as big as Sainsbury's, or, put it another way, nearly as big as Sainsbury's and Asda put together. So a massive presence there. We see them everywhere, don't we? I'm sure a lot of us shop there, and whether we like it or not, they're a fact of life, and they do offer convenience and probably very good prices as well compared to going back to the old days. Sainsbury's and Asda have been punching it out for a long time as to who's number two. Morrison's have grown a lot with their acquisition of Safeway a few years ago. Co-op are going through the acquisition of Summerfield at the moment, and Asda are buying Netto. So there's always lots taking place. It doesn't stand still because people see opportunities there. The other growth is Waitrose, which is interesting because, of course, they're seen to be a much more premium retailer, yet even in this time of recession, they are ones that are growing significant. So what sort of things have the retailers been up to since 1990? Well, first of all, they've been doing what's called centralised off-site packing. In other words, there would have been a time, let's take an Asda for instance, you'd have gone to buy your meat in Asda and you'd have seen a butchery operation at the back of the counter, where they're bringing in large slabs of meat, cutting it down, packing it up and presenting it. That's all gone. That's all done by the meat processors now. Far more efficient, far more cost effective, far better way for the retailers to offer that product to you, the consumers, on shelf. Secondly, there's been introduction of what are called regional distribution centres. In other words, manufacturers don't deliver directly to stores. They deliver into the regional distribution centres. Everything is packaged up together, and then one consolidated delivery goes out to any individual store, or a number obviously, to keep them stocked up. So improving efficiency on that side of things. IT development and loyalty cards. It's not that many years ago since the quick save checkout girls were tested every morning on the 600 lines, and if they got 5 prices wrong, they were off the tills that day. Everybody is now IT, barcodes, straight the way through. We're used to that beep, beep, beep as things go through, and that gives an enormous amount of information to the retailers. And then they choose to use it in different ways. Loyalty cards are an obvious one. Tesco, with their club card, were the first and are still way and way the biggest. And they use it to give rewards to consumers and incentivise them to come back into the store, buy more in areas that they're not buying as much in, etc. So it's a way for them of increasing business. It also helps them in terms of knowing what consumers are buying, and therefore what do they want to have on the shelves and when. Store formats. Again, a big change. You've got everything from Tesco's in the middle of a high street with their small expresses right the way through to the big out-of-town extras, and all the supermarkets following that principle. And then on ranges, all the supermarkets have a mantra of good, better, best. In other words, at the bottom, their value lines, they're very good, they're very honest, they're very straightforward offerings. But you can move up into the standard lines, which are a bit better. And then at the top into the really premium ones. And using different names to reflect that. So in Tesco, we've got Finest at the top, Standard in the middle, and Value at the bottom. In Sainsbury's, Taste the Difference, Standard and Basics. And then Asda, Extra Special, Standard and Smart Price. So all using nuances there just to be able to move things around. So we're all familiar with a lettuce, aren't we? An iceberg lettuce. I bought this yesterday, 80p. It weighs 600 grams. So, you know, that's just a common and garden purchase, isn't it? Also, there was this, a Caesar salad, £2. Now, within that, there's probably about 200 grams of lettuce. But by adding other ingredients, they've put in a third of that and multiplied it up to £2. So adding a lot of value, probably a lot of margin, but giving opportunities to consumers there. On another example, we can look at pork chops. These are Sainsbury's Basics pork chops. So they're bone in, they're rind on. So it's just very simple operation in the processor to cut them through. Very good meat, no different to the meat I'll show you in a moment, but no extra trimming, no extra work put into it. And they're £3.99 a kilo. We then move on to 4 boneless loin steaks. So here, from the same processor, from the same type of pigs, no difference there whatsoever, by extra trimming, taking the bone out, taking the rind off, taking the fat out, £3.99 a kilo becomes £8.99 a kilo. It's a big jump just to have a bit of bone and fat taken away. Absolutely no difference in quality of the meat within either of those products, but more than double in price. You can then go, taste the difference. Outdoor reared pork loin steaks, £9.99 a kilo. So to go to outdoor reared from standard is another £1 a kilo. But we've gone up from £3.99 to £9.99. And that's what we mean by tiering. The retailer will be taking more cash profit, but they need to offer everything to be able to complete their offering, so that it doesn't matter whether you're someone who's married to a millionaire or you're someone who's unemployed. They have an offering for everybody. But in terms of the battle over time, if we go back here to the early, where are we, the early 90s, is that? The early 90s, then Sainsbury's were number one. But then about 1995, they lost their leading position and Tesco took over. And Tesco have never looked back. They've just continued to increase. So as we saw a minute ago, 30% of the market. Sainsbury's, sort of a gentle fallback. In recent years, they've got it back together and they're neck and neck with Asda. And there's always a big battle between the two of them. And then Morrison's, yes, they when they first assimilated Safeway there in the early 2000s, they came up, they lost a bit as the estate changed, and they're coming back again as things move forward. So, you know, big operators fighting it out all the time. But Tesco don't just do groceries. As I'm sure you're aware, you look along the top, Tesco Direct. It's a catalogue operation, the same as Argos. Groceries and wine, obviously. Entertainment and digital, DVDs, CDs, computer games. Finance and insurance, totally different operation, building on the trust that people have in their brand name. Phones and broadband, why leave it on the high street? We can do something like this, would be their approach. Then online, big growth area for them. Another area that they're all fighting it out on at the moment. Who's going to be top on that? Who's making money out of it? Who's going to expand? New ideas like pre-order and come and pick up in store. So you don't even have to be at home to take delivery of it. So a very dynamic market, things moving forward all the time. Well, let's do the depressing bit now, shall we? Let's have a quick chat about the recession. In 9-10, government expenditure on our behalf was 671 billion. But the income, i.e. the taxes we all pay in various ways, was only 496 billion. To finance that, the government have had to borrow £450 million every day. The government debt, therefore, is about 1.1 trillion. These are all numbers that are out in space for us, aren't they? The interest on that debt is 45 billion. So massive numbers that are in the background of all the political decisions that are taking place at the moment. Whichever political party we support, whatever we think the government is doing well or badly, that's the backdrop to it. But since the banking crisis, it's not surprising that consumer confidence has dropped, is it? Dropped off the edge of the cliff, you could say, because there it was running around 20%, up and down a bit, but sort of around there, and then dropping down to a negative of 15% in the course of a year. So we all hear about the banking recession, we all hear about the mortgage crisis, we all hear about government debt, and it does affect confidence. Are we going to have jobs for ourselves, for our families? Are we going to be able to pay our mortgages? It all comes home in terms of how do we feel in terms of confidence about our incomes, our lifestyles. But interestingly, over the last 40 years or so, 50 years, the proportion of household expenditure accounted for by food and drink has moved around considerably. You go back there to the early 60s, and it was nearly 25% of all income was spent on food and drink. That's dropped down to only about 10-12%. The reasons for that is not that we've spent any less on food and drink, probably spent more on drink, haven't we? But we're spending more on other things. We're spending more on eating out. We're spending more on mortgages. We're spending more on holidays and travel. So other areas have come up which have squeezed the percentage on food and drink. But I think it's interesting there, in the last few years, food and drink has come back up as a percentage, which maybe comes back to, actually mortgage costs are relatively low at the moment, the interest rates. Maybe we're not doing as much travel and holidays, and so the proportion's just beginning to move around a little bit more again. As far as grocery price inflation is concerned, then, if we go back to, August 08 on the left-hand side, we were running sort of, around the 8% mark, 8-9% mark. By 09 that had dropped down, and actually April last year went down to only less than 2%, 1.2% there. But it's rebuilt. Part of the reason it's rebuilt is nothing to do specifically with this country. It's about world food prices, wheat in particular. Wheat has a massive effect because, as we're aware, it's in so many products. And it even goes back to meat. Pigs eat wheat in terms of feed wheat. And so food inflation beginning to come back again. Being challenged, if you like, or the retailers looking at it in terms of big promotional offers. I'm sure we've all seen the M&S dine-in for two for £10, and I suggest one or two of us might even have taken advantage of it. Similarly, another offer, family meal for four for £5. Asda, bank holiday barbecue, feed four for £3. You know, price is a highly motivating mechanism for retailers. Put the big offers out there, get them in to buy that, and surprise, surprise, they buy other things while they're in the shop as well. But what motivates food purchasing? Well, there's a myriad of things, obviously, but very simplistically, we look at it in terms of three major drivers. Is a product healthy? Now, some people will or will not be interested in that. Is it convenient? And convenience can take on a number of forms. And is it indulgent? Because the way things are changing, a lot of people are interested in that. Well, just to quickly touch on meat purchasing, then as we can see here, if you look at the lines for fresh and frozen beef at the top there, this is volume. So in the last 10/9, in the last year, an increase of 2.6% on fresh beef, fresh and frozen beef, but an increase of 3.9% on processed beef. So that's burgers and everything like that, going bigger market and increasing faster. Lamb lost 9.1% on fresh and frozen, but processed lamb only lost 2%. So more strength in the processed lamb market there. On pork, fresh pork up 2%, processed pork pies, sausage rolls, things like that, up by 3.3%, and bacon, which of course is processed pork at the end of the day, up by 5.7%. So convenience there, showing through, one in terms of markets being larger for 2 out of the 3 meats there in terms of the convenience sector, larger than the traditional fresh and frozen sectors, and the growth continuing to come through from those sorts of markets. So the combination coming through there. Indulgence. Well, one way to look at indulgence is through the premium sales. And if we look here, you can see that apart from the last 3 years, there was just a continuous growth in terms of premium own label sales. The peaks, surprise, surprise, those big peaks are Christmas. Because we all overspend at Christmas. We all want to treat ourselves and our families, or be treated, even nicer still. And what easier way to do that than to go up the scale, and rather than buying basics or standard, to go up and buy something much more indulgent. Because after all, it is Christmas, isn't it? But Christmas '08, there was a drop there. For the first time, that progress didn't continue. Back to bankers, back to mortgage crisis, back to confidence. Because even in things like this, even at Christmas, people just pulled back that little bit more. But it's regained momentum. So some things, short-term trends, other longer term. Asda have a reputation as being the real cheap end of the market to a lot of people, and they're, lowest price, one of their ads at the moment, lowest price supermarket for 14th year. Massive claim for them. But their extra special range is extremely important for them. They're behind the game compared to others and playing catch up, but making big efforts to catch up on this side of things. And then if we look at chilled and frozen, frozen food's been around for many, many years. There was a time when it was the growth area, when people first started getting freezers or freezer boxes in the top of their fridges. They could actually buy frozen foods, ice cream and totally indulgent things like fish fingers and beef burgers, frozen peas. Wow, how exciting those days were. But as you can see, over time, it's chilled that has pulled away. Frozen finished up at one stage with a very poor image as far as what was in it was concerned. It was what's left over is frozen, and therefore it's not very good. Now, Birdseye in recent years has spent a lot of money, a lot of time revising their ranges, revising their branding, their advertising, to actually put a much more of a quality aspect into it to try and counter that. But still, it's the chilled side that continues to move forward. You go into any supermarket now and you look at the range of ready meals, just as one example. It's enormous. It's always changing because they want to keep up. People get bored with things, and so they're continually revamping and reintroducing. If we just take a quick look at potatoes, then if you go back to 81 there at the beginning, 80 kilograms per head was on fresh potatoes. Sort you buy a £7 bag, a £5 bag, whatever it is. And processed potatoes were only 20 kilograms a head. But over the last 30 years, those two lines have tracked against each other, so that now processed is just ahead of fresh potatoes. In total, the line's down slightly. It's down to about 90 kilograms a head from 130 years ago. But again, just demonstrating this whole point about convenience, that who actually peels potatoes, cuts them into chips, deep fat fries them, and then serves them these days. The fire brigade, just as an anecdote here, in terms of number of household fires, as that processed potato line has grown, McCain's chips have grown, the number of household fires has decreased by about a third because of no further use of deep fat fryers. And so there's an added benefit of the move to convenience. But I think it's just interesting the way now people don't make chips of their own. They buy them, and they're oven chips. They're not deep frying. So there's some sort of, is that a trick that McCain's are doing, or could we make them ourselves still? I don't know the answer to that, but interesting to find out. Other growth trends. Consumer ethics coming much more in. It isn't just about price. We want much more than that. Sorts of things that I'm talking about. Fair trade. We want to think that the coffee, the tea, the bananas, and a range of other products that we're buying, that the farmers in the third world are being treated properly. And fair trade is a very, very simple way of being able to follow that. The retailers again realise that, and that's why in Sainsbury's 100% of their bananas are fair trade, because it reinforces the Sainsbury's image. Has cost them a bit, not a lot, but in terms of their image they feel it's worth the cost of only offering fair trade bananas. Animal welfare. Well, we all think we're better at animal welfare in this country than those heathens on the continent and the rest of the world, don't we? Therefore, when it comes to meat, there's at least an emotional value in terms of buying British because of animal welfare considerations, and we want to see that reinforced. Sustainability. Roy's going to talk a lot more about it later, but it's something that's becoming part of our vocabulary. Yes, it's much more about light bulbs. It's much more about the petrol in our cars and flying away to various places. But at the same time, food is part of sustainability as well. And therefore, are the products that you're buying, are the manufacturers being responsible in their sustainability policies, protecting the planet for the future? Provenance. We want to know where things come from. Whether it says local, and what does local mean? Is it 10 miles away, 20 miles away? If you're in Leeds, local could be, let's say, 20 miles, because there's lots of farms in that area. If you're in London and say 20 miles, there's no farms. So there's different definitions wherever you are. If it says British on the pack, is it British in the pack? Because we've all seen the horror stories. 99% of the products are accurate. Yes, mistakes occur, but I really don't believe there's people out there deliberately telling lies because they've got too much at stake in doing so. And then quality schemes. Lots of people using logos and badges to reinforce and say, there is some sort of scheme behind this. It isn't just a union flag. There's actually something else here which guarantees traceability, independent auditing, whatever it is. And so in terms of the awareness of these things, then I don't think it'd be surprising that fair trade there at 90% comes out top in terms of consumer awareness, because it is such an emotional issue. It is such wide awareness of it. Even Starbucks have fair trade coffee, so it is insidious. It is everywhere now. The second biggest one, though, is the red tractor. I don't know how many of you are aware of the red tractor, but it's a scheme that it's what's called an EU quality scheme. So basically it's about quality over and above that which is normally in the market. But totally off the record, and I would deny I said this in the future, the Union flag on there is the most important thing, because it is a recognition that the products that you see that on are produced in Britain. It is totally legal for it to have a French flag for French produce, a German flag for German produce, etc. But surprise, surprise, you've never seen one yet, have you? And long may that happen, because that's extremely valuable for us. Soil Association there, around that 25-30% mark. The Eblex quality mark, which is available in butchers. Freedom Foods, another important area with the free range products. So a range, but really only two that have any stature of any meaning: Fairtrade and Red Tractor. But in terms of the welfare aspects, eggs are a very interesting example. You haven't got to go back very many years to when eggs were eggs were eggs. And then you started to see TV programmes where you saw the chickens, the hens that produce eggs in the cages. And people going, well, that's horrendous. You know, to keep anything, even a chicken, which isn't the brainiest of animals, to keep a chicken in a cage like that for all its life, just producing eggs, is wrong. And so those rules in terms of what you can do have changed enormously. But again, retailers taking decisions. Sainsbury's, since what's 09 there, only selling non-caged eggs. You can't get the caged eggs in Sainsbury's. Same as bananas, they see a value in making that decision on behalf of their consumers. EU law changes next year in terms of the size of cage, the number of birds that are allowed to be kept in them. There's going to be a massive problem because a lot of the producers on the continent have not changed and have now not got the time to change. And they're going to go, oh, did we have to? And so there's going to be a big punch-up going on in terms of ourselves, because of course we always play cricket and we abide by the rules, don't we? Who have changed and others who haven't. So, just to summarise, the UK grocery market continues to consolidate. As I said, there's fewer brands out there now. The Safeways of this world, Summerfields of this world have all disappeared, and I'm sure there'll be other people that disappear in time as well. Because of the recession, consumer spending has been constrained and will continue to be constrained for the next few years. All that we're hearing, you know, in terms of civil servants and pensions, etc., is all part of that, which is just depressing people's confidence at this point in time. But the long-term trends, they'll move about a bit, but they'll continue. Convenience, because we're all time pressured. We need convenience. But health, greater or lesser value to different people, but it's still there. And however bad things are, we do like to indulge ourselves sometimes, don't we? And if something doesn't taste good, what the hell are we eating it for? So, you know, these things will carry on and drive everything for the future. Thank you.